My name is Peter Kalizos. I'm a lecturer and author in property. I have written a series of articles for the Property Investor magazine titled Property Development 101, a 10-part series. Rather than write more articles on property development, I've decided to produce a set of video diaries on a real-life development that I'm doing in Port Noarlunga South, which is a beachside suburb of Adelaide.
So thank you for joining us today, Peter. Now, what are your property and investment goals?
Right, so the two goals that we have is to retire richer and to increase our cash flow. So I'm currently a lecturer. Certainly the holidays are fantastic, but I would like to increase the cash flow for some of the niceties in life. But the other goal is to retire richer, because I know that the pension won't cut it for us, neither will our compulsory superannuation, because the share market has taken a huge hit in Australia anyway over the last 10 years. So certainly property is going to help us in our retirement years.
And how does this particular property fit in with those goals?
So at the moment it could go either way. So to increase our cash flow, we would need to sell one or both of them, and to retire richer, it's just a matter of holding them. Now, both of these properties should be in high demand because they are right on the Esplanade. So I have every confidence in the world that we'll get good prices for them. They might take a little bit longer to sell because not everybody can afford to buy a property on the Esplanade. But depending on what happens throughout the year, we may decide to keep one or two. And the fact that they are right on the Esplanade almost guarantees good capital growth, because in places like Australia, people love to be close to the beach, and you can't get any closer than the Esplanade. So at the moment, this particular project could satisfy either goal. We're just not sure which way we're going to go. It just depends on what happens throughout this year.
And what made you select Port Noarlunga South as an ideal location?
So Port Noarlunga South I've known for many years. We used to go down there as a kid because Mum and Dad used to take us there for our summer holidays. So Port Noarlunga South I've known for many years. We used to go down there as a kid because Mum and Dad used to take us there for our summer holidays. Because back then it was considered far enough away from Adelaide. But now I take my kids a little bit further to a place called Victor Harbour, which is about 80 k's from Adelaide. But still Port Noarlunga South has retained that lovely holiday feel. So if you drive around it, there are still beach shacks there, there are surf shops there. So it has a lovely feel about it, a lovely community feel, but it's also good access into the city. You've got the train line, you've got the Southern Expressway, you've got the Lonsdale Freeway, of course you've got Main South Road. So there are many different ways to get into the city. So it's also relatively cheap for a beachside suburb with some of Adelaide's best surf beaches. The median house price is very good. So we've got the bonus of great lifestyle, but also when we do need to go into the city for work, which is where I work, it's a relatively easy commute.
Yeah, lovely. So how did you find this site, Peter?
Okay, normally I would say to people, you look on the internet. So in Australia, probably the two most popular sites are realestate.com.au and domain.com.au. Ask real estate agents, look through the newspapers. That's a bit of an old-fashioned way to do it, but sometimes you can find property. But this was quite strange because, as many people know, I lecture in property, and one of my students found it, and she was interested in buying it. But this was going to be her first project, and this project's going to be worth over $2 million by the time it's finished, and she was very reticent. So in discussions, she said to me, "What do you think about this property?" And I said, "I think it looks fantastic. I think it's great." And then the next day she didn't get back to me. So I contacted her and said, "Well, are you going to buy it?" She said, "No, I'm a bit scared." I said, "Well, look, I'll help you do the numbers and you'll see that it all works out very well." So I did that, and didn't contact me the next day, and I said, "Well, are you going to buy it?" And she said, "No." I said, "All right, do you mind if I buy it?" She said, "Yes, that's fine." So look, in return, I promised to help her find the right property for her, because you can understand going from zero to a $2 million project is a big step. So I'm happy that I'm going to help her because she's helped me out. So it's really the people that you know. And generally it would come from real estate agents, but if you're involved in a network of people, especially those who are involved in property, in casual conversations sometimes the opportunities come up.
Yeah, such an important thing, networking, definitely. And what is it specifically about this site that you like?
So the location, in particular the Esplanade, you can't get any better than the Esplanade in a beachside suburb. It's an up-and-coming suburb. It used to be a holiday town, actually, because there was a bit of distance between the Adelaide metropolitan area and these holiday locations. But now as Adelaide has expanded, it's just part of the metropolitan area. But it still has that lovely holiday feel about it. From a development perspective, it's flat. That's very important. So there's no retaining walls required, no extra civil works, no cut and fill. It's wide, so it's wider than average across the front, which is great because we can take great advantage of the sea views. And the zoning. So I've read the development plan, and the zoning allows for this type of development. However, I did know that the zoning was about to change. So if I didn't act quickly, then I wouldn't be allowed to build 3 on this particular site. So with the help of my private town planner, we fast-tracked the application, we got the approval under the old guidelines, so even though it's changed, because we got the approval under the old guidelines, we can still go ahead and build the 3 dwellings.
Wonderful. In regards to the design, what instructions did you give the architect?
Firstly, I made a point of saying we need to make these properties big, even though you may not make them this big if they were 1, 2 or 3 streets back from the beach. Because they are on the beach, people are prepared to pay big money for property on the beach, but it needs to be a big property. We don't want to build too big because then it's a waste of money. So I worked out the ideal size, which is around 240, 250 square metres, and we've just hit the nail on the head there. As the blocks are relatively small, I also asked him to maximise the building envelope. So we've got enough private open space or backyard, just enough. We've got enough front yard, but everything else we've maximised, and in particular going up to do 2-storey so we can make the house the right size.
Is the feasibility based on just the cost of the land and the cost of the build and the sale price?
Okay, unfortunately that's a trap for young players, because often when my students first come to class they say, well, here's what the land costs, this is what the building is going to cost, put the 2 together and that's how much profit I'm going to make. But there are a lot more costs. For example, demolition. If there's a house on there, you need to pay to get rid of it, and that takes time, and in development, time is money. If there are big trees there that you need to remove, that takes time and that takes money to get the tree removed. Purchasing costs, like in Australia and many other countries around the world, when you purchase a property, there are government fees that you need to pay. And in Australia, we call that stamp duty, and that's generally around 4 to 5% of the purchase cost. So there's extra cost there. The selling cost, the real estate agent's not going to sell it to you for nothing, so you've got to factor in the commission or the money that you're going to pay the real estate agent. Professional fees, you're going to need an engineer, you're going to need a surveyor, you're going to need an architect. You may need a building designer. All of these people need to be paid, so you need to factor in their costs as well. Subdivision, if you're going to put on more than 1 dwelling on the site, generally each one needs its own water, each one needs its own sewer connection, so you need to subdivide, so you need to factor in that cost. Civil works, if the block is not flat, you need to allow for some cut and fill, you may need to allow for some retaining walls. And one of the big hidden costs that people forget is holding costs or their interest. So unless you're fortunate enough to have a lot of money in the bank and you don't have to borrow from the bank, you have to allow for those interest payments, because even though this project may take a year, the bank still wants their mortgage repayment every week or every month. And then when it's finished, it's not like you get to keep all of that profit, you need to factor in the tax. And that's where a good accountant is worth their weight in gold.
Now, how did you go about working with council?
Okay, so I first looked at the development plan, and in South Australia the document is called the development plan, and that's like the Bible for property developers. In other states of Australia they call it something different, and around the world they have a different name for it as well. But generally there is a guideline that must be followed. Then I called the council and spoke with the planner. So I interpreted it one way, but then I wanted to clarify that I was on the right track, so I rang somebody at the council. Then when they gave me their feedback, I did a very simple sketch using pencil and ruler and graph paper, and then I took it to the council and spoke with the different planner and asked for their input. And then when I could see that things were going up good and there was a very good chance we were going to get approval, then I contacted my private town planner and he assisted me, and then we also got together with the architect. So the architect was speaking to the town planner, who was speaking to me, so it was a three-way conversation. So we could speed up the process, because in property development time is money. And the other thing was, I knew that zoning was about to change, so we needed to put it in our plans sooner rather than later.
Peter, how did you select Pellegrino Constructions as the builder for this project?
Okay, so in the previous project I used a building broker whose job was to tender out the documents. So in the end he brought back about 6 different quotes. We sat down and had a look at them. And even though Pellegrino Constructions weren't the cheapest, because of a number of other reasons, I thought that they were the best. And because they did such a good job on the previous project, I was more than happy to go back to them for this one. And the other reason is they offered a fixed price contract. Or in other words, it's a turnkey project. So I'm signing this contract for this amount of money, and if there's any nasty surprises, sorry, but that's not my problem. So I think that's very important for developers, because sometimes they can get sucked in to other contracts where it looks really cheap on paper, but then when you read the fine print, it doesn't include connection to stormwater. It doesn't include curtains and floor coverings and landscaping and fencing. But we negotiated a price for all of these things included, so I can sleep well at night knowing that unless something really bad happens, that's the maximum I'm going to pay.
Okay, great. Peter, can you tell us a little bit about the finance?
Sure. In a typical loan scenario, the bank's going to look at what type of risk you are and what type of risk the property is. So in regards to the property, if you're buying, say, an apartment in a group of 300 or 400 apartments, that's quite a risky project for the bank to take on. And so far as your risk is concerned, are you in steady employment? Have you gone bankrupt before? So they're looking at all of these. So basically, your risk will be determined by what we call the 5 C's. So firstly, it's character. Have you defaulted on a loan before? Have you been a bankrupt before? Capacity. So based on your salary and other income, are you able to pay back the loan? Capital. How much deposit are you going to put into the project? The more money you have, the less risk you are seeing from the bank's perspective. Collateral. What other assets do you have to secure the project? Like maybe you might put up your own house as security, for example. And conditions. Why are you borrowing the money? So the bank will typically lend more money on an established property than if you were going to build property. So when you're borrowing to develop, the bank also takes into consideration the property cycle. If you're buying and holding property for 5, 10 years or more, that's not that important, because even though there might be a downturn, it will right itself. However, if you want to sell property at a particular point in time, the bank needs to be relatively confident that the property market and the economy is going to be in such a state that you have a reasonable chance of selling them for the price that you think you're going to sell them for.
Peter, for this project, are you using a project manager?
No, look, even though I'm a very busy person, because I lecture at a university, I lecture at TAFE, I'm writing articles, I'm writing books, family with 4 children, even though I'm very busy, I have every confidence in the builder to manage the project for me. I don't feel like I need somebody else on top of him looking over his shoulder to do the right thing.
What are the reasons that someone would use a project manager?
Well, if you are busy and you don't have either confidence in yourself and your knowledge of property, and or you don't have 100% confidence in the builder, then you may want somebody overseeing everything. Because if you go to work 8:30 to 5:30, 5 days a week, you have other social and family commitments, it's very hard to deal with projects, because often these people will be on site at 7 o'clock in the morning. And if there is a problem, like what are you going to do? You're going to call up work and say, no, I'm not coming in, or I'm coming in late. So unless you have great confidence in the builder, then you might consider having a project manager overseeing everything for you.
And how would you find a good one?
So generally I'd look on the internet, see what other people have said about project managers, talk to other people, and find somebody that I feel comfortable with. So for me, again, it's not the cheapest project manager, but I want to know that if I'm paying reasonable money, then they're going to do the right thing. They will keep an eye on the project, and they will keep me informed of what's happening or what's not happening. So
what is it exactly that a project manager does?
All right, so a project manager can do one or more of these things. Firstly, find the right site. So based on your criteria and the development plan, they should be able to find you a property where you can develop. They can liaise with council. So hopefully they know something about property development and town planning, so they can ask the questions that you may not even know that these are suitable questions. Consult with town planning professionals. So in a project such as this one, which is quite an expensive project and there are 3 of them, then you use your own private town planner as well. You would like them to talk with local real estate agents about the best options, depending on whether you want to sell or rent the dwelling. So they should be asking questions like, how big should the houses be? How many bedrooms do I need? Do I need double garage? Do I need 2 bathrooms? Should it be single story? And lots of these other sorts of questions. Hopefully they'll be doing some market research. This includes determining the optimum size blocks that you should be cutting them up into, optimum sized homes, the configuration of the homes and the internal layout. They should be providing input to the building designer, because if you don't know much about property, then you may be putting in designs that may be very costly and doesn't meet the market's needs. But hopefully a project manager will know what the right answers are and the right type of design. They will help you in gaining the necessary approvals from council. They can do a preliminary feasibility study for you to work out so they can crunch the numbers. So it's not like it's just the cost of the land and the cost of the build and that's all your costs. They can help select the builder for you, liaise with the builder during the construction phase, and then they can also select the right real estate agent if you're going to sell them, or help you select the right property manager if you're going to keep them to rent. So as I said before, a project manager can do one or more of those particular tasks for you.
Peter, what is your recommendation in relation to selecting the right real estate agent or property manager?
So firstly, you need to select a good local real estate agent and underline the word local. They need to know the area very well. They need to know the demographics. They need to know the sort of people that will want to buy that particular property or the sort of people that will rent that particular property. And the other tip I would give is find them early. Don't wait till the end when the property's finished and ready for sale or ready for renting. Get them in early so they can help you with the design. Like, you don't want to build it too big, you don't want to build too many bedrooms or too few bedrooms or not enough bathrooms or the layout is not right. So get their involvement early in the project, and then that will help you finish up with a great project.
Peter, what are the key issues in relation to tax?
So the first thing is you need to speak to your accountant before you start looking for property, because the accountant will help determine whose name the property should be in. Your name, your partner's name, joint names. Will you set up a family trust? Will you set up a company? So all of that needs to be sorted out before you even sign the contract. Then there is the goods and services tax, otherwise known as the GST in Australia, which is our consumption tax. They have consumption taxes around most of the world. Many of them will call it VAT or VAT. So that will also need to be factored in. Hopefully you'll make a profit on the project. Your accountant will help you work out, is this going to be considered as income tax or is this going to be considered as capital gains tax? Because in Australia, capital gains tax is treated differently to income tax. So your accountant will help you with that. And as you're a property developer, you probably need to use the margin scheme. So your accountant can help you with that. And a good indicator of whether you've got a decent accountant is if you mention these questions and they don't know the answers to them, go find yourself another accountant.
So thank you for speaking with me today, Peter, and I wish you all the best in your project. And I can't wait to see the finished project.
Me too. Thank you very much, Belinda.
Thank you.